Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing another video from Grab the Lantern. Today, the Skarner VGU has finally been revealed, and I am very excited to talk you guys through it today. I'll let you guys know what the new Skarner abilities are going to do and kind of break down what I think Skarner is going to feel like once we finally get a chance to see him in game. But let's go ahead and jump right into things, starting off with Skarner's new passive, which I've seen a couple of different names for. Threads of Vibration is, I think, the name that they're going to end up going with. Suffice to say, Skarner's auto attacks, his Qs, both of his Qs, and his ultimate will apply Quaking for a period of time to enemies they hit, and at maximum Quaking stacks, the enemies take % health magic damage over the duration. Now, this ability, to me, solidly says Skarner is a tank. I've seen some comments floating around that Skarner only has percent or health scalings on his abilities. He has no AD or AP or any other kinds of scalings, which would also say he's a tank. There's other things in the kit that tell me that he is a tank, but this more than anything else says this champion is going to be a tank. He has a % max HP damage, which means he's going to be the kind of champion that wants to thrive in the middle of team fights, applying the stacks to as many champions as possible, as well as just standing next to enemy champions to keep the Quaking going. This also means he'll synergize with things like Sunfire Cape and Abyssal Mask in general. Lots of things that I think this ability does, but it's not exactly that exciting to think about either. Let's go ahead and hop right into talking about Skarner's Q here, Shattered Earth. He rips a boulder from the earth that gives him bonus attack range, attack speed, I believe, and causes the final attack to throw the boulder at the target, which does significantly increase bonus damage as well as a slow in the area of effect. Now, importantly to note here, this is on the final auto attack. It's a 3-hit combo, essentially, but Skarner can reactivate Q after as a boulder to throw his boulder, ending the effect early, but also causing the damage and slow to happen to the first enemy unit it hits. This is a very flexible ability for Skarner. This is going to be his bread and butter, and I think there's a lot of fun gameplay that this implies. This, first of all, means that Skarner has to make a decision about whether he wants to stick it out for the full damage of this ability, or throw the rock early in order to just get a slow onto targets. As a tank that doesn't have a very reliable gap closer, slight spoiler alerts, Skarner has to have different ways of approaching fights, and this is one of them. Deciding whether or not to throw the rock or hold on to the rock is an interesting gameplay aspect, especially for early ganks, where you have the ability to pick a rock, run into a lane holding the rock, enemy champion has to decide, is he going to throw it at me, is he going to hold on to it, how do I want to approach this this gank scenario, and you as the Skarner player will also have to think of it as well. Generally though, if you can get into range, you always want to be holding onto the rock the whole time, because that way you'll get the bonuses the whole time you've got it. I think this is going to be an interesting ability to play with, and definitely the one that Skarner players are going to get the most familiar with off the cuff. Skarner's W is Seismic Bastion. He gains a shield and sends out a shockwave that damages nearby enemies, and he increases the shield on champion hits. This, hilariously, is like word for word Jarvan the Forest W. Like it's almost literally just Jarvan the Forest W. The only difference is that it damages, which you could make an argument that that's just power creep, but that's not really the time or place for us to discuss that now. This is a workhorse ability. It tells Skarner, hey, here's extra damage, durability, and utility just immediately by pressing a button. It's not really doing that much else for you. There's some thought process here. Does Skarner want to save the W for actually blocking damage? Is he going to use it for extra CC? Does he want to use it for extra damage? Like, there are some options here I could see that Skarner may want to consider when using this ability, but it feels like you're just kind of pressing this button off cooldown in the middle of fights, because it applies slow, it give me shield, I have a bigger shield when I'm near more champions, which reinforces the vanguard aspect of Skarner. Generally, I think this is going to work out quite well for him, but not particularly interesting. Also interesting to note, the Q and the W are both very similar to Skarner's old Q and W respectively. You have the sort of area of effect damage to someone nearby, maybe not necessarily in your auto attack range, but nearby. The W is very similar as well, shifting from the bonus movement speed into more durability instead, which I think is kind of interesting, but also goes to show the sort of restructuring of Skarner into more of a vanguard type playstyle. Skarner's E is Ishtal's Impact, and this is the funniest ability I've ever seen. Skarner charges passing through terrain. If he collides with a champion or monster, he can slam them into a wall to damage and stun them. This ability is very powerful. I believe there was a version of this that Riot were playtesting a while back where you could steer Skarner during the charge, similar to how Scion ult works. I'm not sure, based on the video, if you can still steer or if it's just a straight line, but suffice to say, this does have the ability to be very powerful. It also means that Skarner now has the ability to flank through walls, which is something that he was missing previously. Skarner was sort of a binary champion. He needed just a ton of movement speed or flash in order to actually get into a fight for an Impale. Now this says Skarner can look to use terrain, saying, hey, you're going to push up next to this wall. You can't see me on the other side, but I'm going to tunnel straight through it and grab you and smash you into a wall on the other end, which I think is going to be very powerful. There's also a mini suppression on this. When he grabs a champion, the particle effects on this do indicate suppress, which then means he has 2 suppressions in his kit total after we factor in his ultimate, which could lead to a very nasty CC combo where you charge out of a wall, grab a guy, slam him into another wall for the stun, then charge your R, grab him again for another suppression, and then you're CC'd for like 3 full seconds and probably dead immediately thereafter. Very powerful ability, and I'm going to look to see how people use this ability, because I think this is going to what separates the good Skarner players from the great Skarner players, and I also think it's going to be what dictates if Skarner is going to be good in competitive play. I think that if you can't steer this ability, Skarner will probably be pretty bad. I think if you can steer it, I think Skarner has the opportunity to be good, but we'll still hold out on judgment for Skarner overall. Suffice to say, though, very happy with how this ability sort of restructures Skarner and gives him some more opportunities to make plays in a way that doesn't fundamentally change his strengths and weaknesses from what he was like before. Finally, Skarner's ultimate is, of course, still Impale, but there are some important changes on this ability. He lashes out with his tails, plural, to suppress enemy champions, plural. That's right, it's area of effect, and you can suppress up to 3 champions in the AoE. However, as you might have noticed, there is now a cast time as well as a hitbox indicator on this. This means that flash R'ing someone is basically dead. If you flash press R, they will have plenty of time to see the ability coming and step out of the way or use their own flash, which means that the reliability of Impale has gone down the toilet. This ability is not reliable at all, but there is the opportunity for significantly more utility now that it can hit multiple champions. This means that you can do something like tunnel through a wall, grab a priority target and bring him closer to your team, maybe slam him into a wall, and then either CC him further with your ultimate. If people come to help that champion, they're also getting CC'd. Maybe instead of grabbing the champion you singled out, you slam him into a wall and then grab their friends that are coming to try and rescue them and pull them away, so that way the isolated guy is just like totally screwed and you're meanwhile tanking the rest of the enemy team, which is what you should be doing as Skarner. It's a very flexible ability now, which I really, really like, even though there have been some reliability changes. That said, though, for those of you who I know are going to be doom and gloom about the Impale nerfs here, I think it needed nerfs. It was such a strong ability pre these changes that Skarner's base kit didn't have room for buffs of any sort. Like, you had to nerf Impale if you wanted to make the rest of Skarner's kit playable. We've seen this before with champions like Sejuani, where their ults are just so strong that you have to nerf the rest, to keep the rest of their kit deliberately weak to compensate. And I'm happy then with Impale losing some degree of power in exchange for more power in the rest of the champion's base kit, so that way they feel like more than just an Archie, and I still think Impale is going to be extremely powerful because of these scenarios that I listed above. And overall, I think that this means Skarner is a very interesting tank pick. I think he's going to be the kind of champion where you have to consider carefully about how to use your abilities. He has a very similar playstyle to old Skarner. It's a lot of movement speed based initiation. It's a lot of ambient area effect magic damage and a generic tanking button where you just press button, receive shield, and the kind that we really haven't seen on modern League of Legends champion designs in quite some time. But that means he's very similar to old Skarner, who was very reliant on movement speed for his mobility, had an on-demand tank button, had sort of a spammable area effect damage button in the middle of team fights, right? Like, a lot of that's been kept very similar. I think the devil is in the details, though, and I think that Skarner is making up for a lot of his lost power in the kit in very flexible ways. The ability to throw the Q bowler as a separate way to gap close onto a target. The ability to use the W to slow somebody if you're just not quite within range to start smacking them with a rock. The ability for the E to go through walls to give him the flanking opportunities. Area of effect Impale. Like, there's a lot of really powerful things here in Skarner's kit for him to use now, and a lot of very flexible things for him to use in his kit now, as opposed to the old Skarner where there just wasn't that much flexibility. Skarner was the kind of champion where you either got ahead and then just stat checked anybody who faced you, or you were behind and did nothing because your only utility was on a targeted ability that you had to be in melee range for, or a effectively targeted ability that you had to be in melee range for because Fracture only slowed if you weren't actually auto-attacking. This new kit gives Skarner a lot more options of how to play engagements and how to play fights, and just a lot more things to think about and do overall, which I'm quite happy with overall. Skarner's also got crowd control in literally all of his abilities, except his passive. Like, that's crazy. This champion is a tidal wave of CC, in the same vein that we haven't seen since a champion like Nautilus, I want to say, who I think was the last champion who really could just, like, keep you stun locked forever. Like, Skarner really has the ability to layer crowd control on targets in a way that I don't think we've seen in a while, and I think that's going to be a very exciting place for him. That said, though, Skarner's viability in things like pro play or high elo, I think is going to be entirely tied to his how much his numbers are, right? Like how good his numbers are. If Skarner's not particularly tanky and has to build very tanky, or just doesn't do, like, just barely doesn't do enough damage, I don't think he'll be playable. He has flexibility, yes, but at the end of the day, Skarner's still just kind of a champion that wants to get in the middle of enemy champs, press W, auto-attack people, and just do things that aren't particularly fun or engaging or outplayable, shall we say. And as a result, then, I think that if Skarner's numbers are good, he will be viable. If Skarner's numbers are bad, he will not be viable. But I do think that the E giving him the ability to walk through walls does upgrade a lot of what Skarner was doing before, so we'll ultimately see where this ends up with Skarner overall. Flavor-wise, I kind of like how they've gone with Skarner's design. I like the sort of like Mesoamerican inspired big scorpion dude. I like the fact that we're building out a little bit more of Ishtal's lore with this. It's funny because the unnamed continent that Viego and Neela are from literally has more champions and more development for it than Ishtal does, which is like on the one map that we've been given, which is like kind of crazy when you think about it. So I'm happy to see that this sort of change. I am mourning the loss of who Skarner was previously. Don't get me wrong, guys. I could talk your ear off about it given the opportunity. I won't do it in this video, not the time. But suffice to say, I think the direction Riot have chosen for Skarner is interesting, shall we say, and I'm looking forward to at least seeing where they are going to go forward with him from there. But that is going to be it for me today, guys. Those are my first few thoughts on Skarner. The Primordial Sovereign is his new title, which I do think is quite nice as well. Let me know what you think of the rework down in the comment section below, especially if you were a former Skarner main. I'd love to hear your thoughts about how the new kit looks in comparison to his old kit. I've made some assumptions about how it works and some assumptions about old Skarner, so I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you enjoyed the video today, go ahead and leave it a like. And if you really enjoyed the video today, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. And don't forget to ring that bell icon. It will let you know every time I upload, so you won't miss a single video of mine. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.